This trade is carried on in a very picturesque street, called the Souk en Nahassin, or Street of the Coppersmiths, where, in tiny little shops 4 or 5 feet square, most of the copper and brass industry of Cairo is carried on. Opening out of this street are other bazaars, many very ancient, and each built for some special trade. So we have the Shoemaker's Bazaar, the Oil, Spice, Persian, and Goldsmiths' Bazaars, and many others, each different in character, and generally interesting as architecture. The Persian Bazaar is now nearly demolished, and the Khan Khalili, once the centre of the carpet trade, and the most beautiful of all, is now split up into a number of small curio shops, for the people are becoming Europeanized, and the government, alas, appear to have no interest in the preservation of buildings of great historical interest and beauty. One other feature of old Cairo I must notice before leaving the subject. In the old days of long caravan journeys, when merchants from Persia, India, and China brought their wares to Cairo overland, it was their custom to travel in strong companies capable of resisting possible attacks by the wild desert tribes, and in Cairo special khans, or inns, were built to accommodate the different nationalities or trades. In the central court the horses and camels of the different caravans were tethered. Surrounding it, and raised several feet above the ground, were numerous bays in which the goods were exposed for sale. Above, several stories provided sleeping accommodations for the travellers. Like the bazaars, many of these khans are very ancient, and are most interesting architecturally, as well as being fast disappearing relics of days which, until the introduction of railways and steamers, perpetuated in our own time conditions of life and trade which had continued uninterruptedly since that time so long ago when Joseph first built his store cities and granaries in Egypt. It is impossible in a few pages to convey any real impression of Cairo, and I have only attempted to describe a few of its most characteristic features. There is, however, a great deal more to see. The citadel, built by that same Saladin against whom our Crusaders fought in Palestine, and which contains many ancient mosques and other buildings of historic interest, and the curious well called Joseph's Well, where, by means of many hundreds of stone steps, the visitor descends into the heart of the rock upon which the citadel is built, and which until recently supplied it with water. Close by is the parapet from which the last of the Mamluks made his desperate leap for freedom, and became sole survivor of his class so treacherously murdered by Muhammad Ali. Behind, crowning the Mokattam hills, is the little fort built by Napoleon the Great to command the city, while in every direction are views almost impossible of description. To the east is that glorious cemetery known as the Tombs of the Caliphs, which contains many of the finest architectural gems of mediaeval Egypt. To the west is Fostet, the original city of the tent, from which Cairo sprang, while over the rubbish heaps of old Babylon, the Roman aqueduct stretches towards Rhoda, that beautiful garden island on whose banks tradition has it that the infant Moses was found, while still further across the river, sail dotted and gleaming in the sun, the great pyramids mark the limit of the Nile Valley and the commencement of that enormous desert which stretches to the Atlantic Ocean. Looking south, past Memphis and the pyramids of Saqqara and Darshur, the Nile loses itself in the distant heat haze, while to the north is stretched before us the fertile plains of the Delta. At our feet lies the wonderful Arab town, whose domes and minarets rise high above the dwellings which screen the streets from view, but whose seething life is evidenced by the dull roar which reaches you even at this distance. It is a city of sunlight, rich in buildings of absorbing interest and ablaze with color. As for the people, ignorant and noisy though they are, they have much good humor and simple kindness in their natures, and it is worth notice that a stranger may walk about in safety in the most squalid quarters of the city, and of what European capital could this be said? End of chapter 4.